Well, good afternoon, good morning, and good evening, everybody. I hope you can all hear me and see the screen there. Welcome to the webinar today. We are hosting about Arbortext APP v11.1. TFOM are PTC sub-resellers with data copy publishing solutions. And if you'd like any more details about 11.1 or Arbortext or upgrades, training, etc. after the webinar, please do feel free to get in touch. Presenting the webinar today is Simon Taylor, Arbortext Product Manager at PTC. Simon's a former colleague at Advent 3v2 and a long-time aficionado of all things APP and automated XML publishing. So I'd like to hand over straight to Simon now, and we can get started.
Thanks, Chris. I don't think I've been called an aficionado before. So let's see whether my screen sharing is working. Is that working?
I can see something.
Can you see a green blob?
I can see a green blob.
What can you see now?
I can see some slides.
Okay, good. Marvelous. Let's get cracking then.
Okay.
So, hello, everybody. We're here to talk about 11.1 of APP, which became available for download end of last week, beginning of this week for our customers. So I don't know whether you've had a chance to download it or not yet, but if you have, then go and have a play. But this will give you some information about what the major new features are which are in this release. So let's get cracking with the first one. So the first one I want to talk about is graphic downsampling. So for a long time in APP, the resolution of the graphics you put in kind of dictates the resolution of the graphics you get out. So that's all well and good when you're going to print. But what if you want to output a lower res PDF for downloading online, for example? Then you would have to probably go through PostScript and then set some distiller options to downsample your images. So what we've done is provide downsampling in the PDF options in 11.1. So as with Acrobat and Distiller and that kind of thing, we've split it up into the 3 graphics types. We already had different compression types for those graphic types in APP, so it makes sense to do that as well. So as you can see in the dialog box in the screenshot there, you now have a downsample option and the option to downsample when you've reached a certain threshold of resolution in your image. So you can specify the resolution that you want to downsample the graphic to and the threshold, which is the thing over on the right. So we have 3 different downsampling algorithms which are available. You can see those are listed there. Subsample is the most basic one. That will take, we'll do some maths and then take every pixel which relates to the sort of ratio of the resolution that you want to downsample to. You have an average version which kind of blurs the image and then subsamples. So you get an average, more or less, of the colors of the pixels which surround the one that you're picking out. And then you have this bicubic algorithm, which is, I can't pretend to understand the maths behind it, but it does a more accurate job of picking the color of the pixel that you want to downscale to, and it does a better job of picking them out. The only thing is, subsampling is quicker to downsample using than average, and average is quicker than bicubic. But you get a better result with bicubic than you do with the others. So it's up to you to decide how you want to downsample and what the resolutions that you want to downsample those things to. So you can access this stuff through the print dialog box, through the PDF options on the compression tab. You can access it through Sprint control streams. You can access it through the PDF options in FOM. And there's also a set of print variables. I think this is the P286 kind of range, which allow you to set those if you want to do it automatically as well. Okay, so that's kind of handy. You can now create lower res PDFs for delivery online, which means that your readers will be able to download them a lot quicker. So as a side effect of doing this, what we needed to do was be able to sort of pull the image in, do some stuff to the image, and then hand it over to our PDF output library. But that meant that what we were using, the mechanism that we were using to support transparency and color profiles in graphics, that would no longer work. So we did some work to support those two things in the non-pass-through mechanism as well. So if you have transparent values in your graphics, and if you have color profiles attached to your graphics, then those will be maintained through the linked way of outputting PDF graphics rather than relying on the pass-through option. So I hope that makes sense. So if you want to use transparency in color profiles, you no longer have to use the pass-through option. That's basically what I'm trying to say. So that's graphic downsampling. Quite a handy feature, and it's one less reason for you to need to go to PostScript and distill your PostScript to PDF. So the next thing I want to have a look at is display objects. Now, I hope everybody knows what display objects are. If you don't, here's a quick recap. Display objects kind of give you information about the formatted page, either while you're formatting or after the page has been formatted. So similar to the idea of get_vars, but it's accessing them through the formatting object model and the JavaScript API. What we've done in 11.1 is extend the objects that we had implemented in a maintenance release earlier this year to provide information down to what we call fields in APP. So when APP is formatting a page, it divides the areas up into sort of rectangular boxes and fills those things up with content. So there's different sort of levels of field, and they create kind of like a hierarchy of fields in APP. So the main one is it's called an A box in APP, but we call it an FD area in display objects, and that's how the frames themselves are divided up into major blocks, major boxes of content, and then within those we sort of flow content areas, which can be lines or tables, table cells, blocks, block regions. Okay, so those are children of the areas, and they contain content. The thing about table cells and block regions is that they can also contain further tables and table cells and further blocks and block regions. So you can see how this hierarchy builds up. And then each of those table cells and block regions can then contain lines. So you can sort of drill down to the lines which are the individual lines which are being formatted on the page. There's two other objects listed in that list there at the top. The first one is hidden. Now, hidden represents those empty blocks that get created where nothing is output. So APP sort of throws away the formatting block itself, but it still processes some of the stuff which is inside the block. So that will create an FD hidden object. So you can find out where those things are on your page and what's contained within them. And then you have this thing called an FD wrapper. And an FD wrapper is the thing which will contain nested blocks and nested tables. So inside a table cell, if you've got another table inside there, that will all be contained within an FD wrapper object. Okay, hope that makes some sense. So each of the sort of content area objects, they inherit the FD content area object, and that object has a number of different properties which are pretty useful. So if I bring up this is our internal wiki on the FOM, but you'll be able to see this in the FOM documentation which comes with the product. If I bring up FD content area, you can see that the properties contain some useful information. So you've got the type of content area at the top, So it could be one of those which I've just listed: line, table, table cell, block, block region, wrapper, or hidden. You can find its X and Y location on the page and its width and height. So you can figure out how big the thing is and where it is on the page. Y base gives you the baseline position within that content area as well. So that's the baseline position of the text content. Now this is interesting because if you've got professional leading turned on, for example, the baseline position is at the bottom of the content area. But if you've got normal leading turned on, then it's going to be a quarter of the way of the height, the leading height of the content area up from the bottom of the content area. Because as you know, APP does 3/4 of the leading above the line and a quarter of the leading below the line. And the start pause thing is also kind of interesting because that gives you information about how APP got there and what certain counters and other kind of information is available. So you can figure out now, using the display objects, the values of counters at the beginnings of each of the lines in turn. Okay, so you can sort of drill down into the hierarchy and find out what counter values are at different places on the page. There's also some stream hierarchy information which will give you information about how the content is nested at the beginning of the content area, and there's some information about page number. So that's content area, and all those new objects inherit FD content area. If I have a look at line, for example, there's some interesting information in here as well. So each line knows whether it's the beginning of a paragraph or at the end of a paragraph, and that information is provided on the FD line object. So APP doesn't really know about paragraphs. It doesn't have a paragraph object in display objects, but in each of the individual lines know whether it starts or ends a paragraph. You can also tell whether that line is hyphenated because it has to go through the hyphenation engine in order to provide that information. And you can also find the text which gets rendered on that line, which is also kind of interesting. And I'll show you why that's a useful thing in a minute when I show you a quick demo of what's going on there. So the other objects, I'll leave it up to you to sort of sort through. Tables and blocks can give you the name of the block which is being started, the number of columns, and the content in there. The content will give you a list of the display objects which are contained within there. So they will be like lines, for example, or tables or further blocks, that kind of thing. FD frame has also got some extra ones in there. You can see there's columns, but there's also lines and areas and content. So if you've got your current frame on the page, you can find out each of the individual lines within that frame and then interrogate those and drill down into those. So that's pretty interesting too. So let's have a quick look at that world in APP and a useful example of that. So here I've got a page and I've got some text on the page, and down here I've got a script which is pretty ugly because I was messing around with it. But what it's doing is it's finding each of the lines on the page which has the same ending word as the line before it, and it's using a highlight method to highlight that those lines. So here I'm using the display objects to get an array of the lines which are on the page, and I'm looping through those and examining the text of those to see whether the last word of this line matches the last word of the previous line. And if it does match, then I'm using a highlight method, which is a method on lines, or I think the content areas, to highlight it. Now that highlighting is part of screen preferences. It's down here, so it's drawn on the same level as the block guides and frame guides, that kind of thing. You can turn it on or off, so it's not a printable thing, but you can see it there, and this is telling it to highlight it. And to show that it's not all smoke and mirrors, if I delete this text and refresh, you can see how that highlighting around there disappears. But if I put the space back in and refresh, it'll pull that put up that highlighting again. If I zoom in, that's right keys. If I zoom in, you can see that the highlighting will show the content box, which is the red line, and the green line is the baseline position. So this is that Y-based property of the content area. If I was to change the leading type on this frame, then you would see that the content box will be measured from the baseline. Okie dokie. So hopefully that give you some understanding of what's going on there in display objects. One of the places that they're really useful is in the page end events, which we added. I think it was M40. I think we added those. And page end events allow you to execute some APP code at the end of a page before the next page gets formatted. So what you can do is interrogate all of the lines on a page and find out some information about what's going on there. So if you want to avoid this kind of thing, you'll be able to interrogate the document, find out all the paragraphs where you've got lines which end in the same word, and you better tell APP to reformat that page with some different variables in order to avoid that that condition that you're looking for. The multiple lines ending in the same word. So using the display objects with the page end events is a good thing. It's pretty awesome. Okay, so that's that one. Let's go back to presentation. So yes, if you want to find out some more about display objects, have a look in the FOM documentation. I'll send out this example here as well. Well, Chris will. I'll send it over to him, and he'll send it out so you can have a quick look at see what's going on there. As it says, you can access display objects while APP's idle from the page end events, but also while it's formatting. But don't forget, same with getVars, that if you're looking at a baseline position, for example, then once the page is finished and vertical justification has done its thing, then the baseline position might have changed after the formatting. So don't expect these values to be completely finished and final while you're formatting. It will be final once you're in the page end event or when APP's idle, but it won't be the final values while you're formatting. Okay, let's move on then. So this is the big deal about 11.1 really, and this is this idea of an external debugger for APP. So we've been wanting to do this kind of thing for quite a while. It's part of a process that we're going through to provide a better interface for using APP. And so this is the first iteration of it. It's a JavaScript debugger which allows you to look at what's going on while you're formatting and do some extra things. So the main reason we wanted to do this was because, well, since we added the JavaScript engine to APP, writing template code, even though you can use like the yellow bar or the T-tag edit window, it's not really a great fun experience. We have that JavaScript error bar which gives you some feedback, but it's not a huge amount of fun. So what we wanted to do is provide a much better tool for working with JavaScript inside APP. And as it happens, we're going to start building this out to do an awful lot more. So I think the best thing to do is to show you what's going on there. But first, I'll start by showing you how this stuff is provided to you. When you install 11.1, you'll see there's a new folder in there called JS Debug or DBG. And inside there is everything that you need to run the debugger, okay? And I'll show you how to run it in a second. But what we've done is we've hooked up a bunch of open source libraries, as well as writing a load of our own code. We're using an API which is added to APP to allow interrogation from external sources, and we're using sockets to connect to APP. So that stuff's in there. There's some examples of how to use the API in there. If you want some documentation on that API, then get in touch, and I've got a document that I can send out to you. So let's see how you start this thing. So let's fire up APP. Here's APP. I've already got it running. Let's open a document. Let's open something nice and easy. Where have you gone? Let's open this one here. So this is a version of the demo file, which I tend to use for showing off the debugger. So the first thing you need to do is open a socket in APP. So there's a socket, open command, macro, get a number, and then you'll need to use the debug keyword, and this will open the APP for debugging. So if I do that, APP is now ready to be debugged, and I can now, in a browser, I can now connect to that. So using localhost, then the socket number, APP will serve up a page from that folder of information, and you can see what's going on here. So that's the way you would do it by hand, but what I've got is a button to do that, and I can show you what's in that button if you like, just because it's kind of handy. You don't want to do those two steps yourself. So I have my own toolbars, have done for a long time, and here we go. Here's the action that I created. Oh, for goodness sake. So I created my own icon, created my own action, and this is the macro that I execute inside when that button's clicked. So there's the socket open command, and then I'm just using the default web browser in Windows to open up that URL, which is what I just typed in. Okay, so that's fairly straightforward. If you want more information about that, give me a shout and I can send you over the instructions that I've put together to be able to do that. So hit that button and up it comes. Okay. So the first thing, you'll see that there's a number of different panels here, and each of them have their own little jobs. First thing over here on the left-hand side is a resource tree. Okay, so that's a set of editable tags which are inside the currently active APP document. Okay, so the one that's open in APP will list you those tags. It's got a refresh button up here if you want to refresh the list. So if you've created tags in APP and you want to repopulate that list, then it will show you there. The type of tag is listed in that in the grey box, and if you've got namespaces, then the tags are sort of nested within like a branch of a tree, where this is the namespace and these are the tags within that namespace. Okay, so if I wanted to, I could select one of the tags, and you'll see that this source window is now populated with the contents of that tag. So that's the second panel. The third panel is over here. We call this the inspector, and that gives you information about what's going on. That's you list the breakpoints. You can see which tags you're nested within. You can set up some watched expressions and see some information about the state of JavaScript at that point. There's a set of buttons up here which allow you to go through the debugging process. Down here we've got something which we call the console, and this just sort of displays feedback from the JavaScript engine. And this little box down here is a command line. We'll have a look at each of those in turn. So I'm just going to have a quick drink. Lovely. So here we have the contents of the body tag. And just to show you that it is actually the contents of the body tag, if I go into APP, pop that thing up, you can see that it is actually the contents of that body tag. I'm not joking. So in here, I can now start to do some editing. Right. So if I edit in this window here, this little web application will send back commands to APP to update the content streams which are inside the APP document. So if I was to go back over here and refresh, you can see that the changes I made are being replicated over here. So that's pretty cool. I can now start editing in a much nicer environment for editing JavaScript. We've hooked up a specific JavaScript editor, and that editor came with a bunch of cool bits of information. All right. So I can now do things like formatting dot, and if I press Control Space, have some nice autocomplete stuff with some documentation attached to it. So if I wanted to, say, use a block command, start typing block, it'll give me like a refined list of the the block commands, and it will also give me the documentation that's associated with it. Now, all this information is generated from the FOM definitions file that you get with APP as a bunch of XML to generate the PDF. And Richard showed you how to do that by dropping the JavaScript onto APP. It will generate a nice PDF of the FOM documentation. So this information is generated from that information, okay? But it gives it to you where you actually want it. So you don't have to go looking it up in either a wiki page or a PDF or any of that kind of stuff. So it also makes it a lot easier for you. But if I, for example, select block start, I know it's a function. If I go inside the parentheses of the function, there's also some documentation about what that function is expecting. Okay, so in this case, it's expecting a block object, and there's some extra parameters in there, which is pretty cool. If I click away from there and click back in, that thing's going to pop up again. If I go over an object, like current paragraph is an F paragraph object, and if I do Control O, some documentation will pop up briefly for you, so you can actually see what type of object that is, and it'll tell you what about it. So hyphenation level, it knows that the value of that needs to be a number, so it'll give you some information about that. Height is going to have to be a string. Current style is a F style object. Okay, so it's a fairly smart editor. You can also do something like var f equals formatting f dot and space. So if you sort of used a variable within that piece of code, the editor's smart enough to know what type that variable is. So it'll be able to give you that documentation, which is pretty cool. Here's another funny thing for you. Got search and replace in there as well, by the way. If I do control dot, it will select all of the things with the same name in that tag. So if you wanted to, for example, rename a variable, then that's pretty handy. You can just rename them all in one go. But there's also a tool inside this editor, Control Q, which allows you to rename the variable. There's a variable. There you go. It pops up a little dialog box up the top of the screen there. So everywhere inside that JavaScript code, you can rename the variable to something. So it's got all these sort of handy little tools. Another handy one, although I haven't figured out why I'm going to use it yet, but I'm sure I will, is if you control and click in different places, you can type in more than one place at the same time. Kind of weird, but it could be useful if you want to, like I'm doing here, sort of comment out a whole load of stuff. You can do it to more than one line at a time, or you can type the same thing in more than one place at a time, which is pretty cool. So that's the editor sort of quick look and feel. If you use the click on the line numbers here, you can set a breakpoint in the content, and you can see that the breakpoints list over here suddenly got one in here. Now, what I want to do then is pause the pause APP out at that point. So if I hit refresh, and that's over here in the button bar, there's a TRF button. If I hit refresh, APP in the background over here, behind the scenes, has refreshed the page, and it's working through the code, and it's paused at this line. You can tell it's this line because it's got the blue arrow, and you can now start doing stuff in there. You can start stepping through the code, for example. So I can step through line by line using the step into button. If I want to step over a method or a function, then I can step over it, or I can use this button here to run onto the next place where that that breakpoint is. What else I can do is, if I want to get rid of that breakpoint, I can click in there and then run on, and it will finish formatting. I've add a breakpoint and use this. See this little icon over here on the right-hand side? I can click on that if I want to get rid of the breakpoint too. Something else I can do If over here in this breakpoint list, if I click on the breakpoint button, it turns to a red circle rather than to a red filled circle. That sort of temporarily disables the breakpoint. So the breakpoint's still there in the content, but it won't be active. I can make it active by just clicking on it again, and that'll make sure that APP runs up against that, which is pretty cool. So in my content, I've got this tag called tag. I'm going to put a breakpoint in there just to show you what happens when you have nested tags. So this tag is going to call another function. This function is going to call another function, and so on. So if I refresh, okay, it's pausing at that point. I can step into that function. Come on. Okay, so it's gone into nested tag. It's set up a variable. You can see down here in the scope chain, APP or the JavaScript engine knows that f is a variable, but it hasn't actually populated it with anything yet. So if I click through a bit more, you can see that f now has some information about it. So it's an f paragraph object. If I expand that, it will give you all of the properties of that f paragraph object. I'll show you some more cool stuff with that at the moment, but at the moment you can see that you can find out everything there is to know about that paragraph at that point. You can also see up here in the call stack that I'm now sort of nested. So undefined is the main content stream, tag is the first tag, nested tag is the tag that I'm processing at the moment. If I click tag, it'll take me back to the position I am in the tag JavaScript, which is pretty cool. If I go into nested tag, I can now keep stepping into stuff. So I'm now in like the bottom of the nested tree structure. I've got another thing on the call stack. I can now step out of there. Something comes off the call stack and I'm back into nested tag. I can step out of there, back into tag again, and then step out of there and sort of carry on my formatting. So formatting should have finished by now. So that's pretty cool too. So what you would use this for is if you know there's something wrong with a bit of JavaScript that you've written, but you're not exactly sure what it is, you can then step through the code command by command. You can interrogate the state of JavaScript to find out information about whether you set the right properties, whether you are executing the right bit of code, whether your variables have got the right values, and so on. To make that life a little bit easier, we have these watched expressions up there. So what I'm going to do is go back into body, and I'm going to put a breakpoint in there somewhere. And over here in the watched expressions, let's put it down here on the counters line. I'm going to put formatting.counters 1. So I'm going to keep an eye on the #1 X counter, basically. So you can see here at the moment it says error. Now you should know why that's giving you an error. It's because formatting isn't available at the moment. I'm not formatting, so the formatting object isn't available to APP. But once I start refreshing, I can now see the formatting object. So this expression's now got some meaning, and you can actually see the values of it. So I can now step through line by paragraph by paragraph, body tag by body tag, to see the values of those counters, which is pretty useful. So you can use that then to sort of figure out what those values are while you're stepping through. So I can also do over here, I could do formatting dot current style. So current style is an f-style object, and I can, if I refresh again, I can see. Let's go on a couple. I can see all the properties of the current style at that point. So if you want to make sure that your code is applying the right formatting styles, then you can do that there, which is great. So one of the things that struck me when I started using this was the number of properties that each of these objects have and how much you can drill into things. So for example, letter space has got a whole bunch of stuff in there. Color is another good one. There's a lot of different properties within color. So you can start drilling into things a lot further. let's get rid of these ones and show you something else that's interesting. Let's get rid of that and go to the end. Let's add display current frame. So if I refresh, put that breakpoint back in. If I refresh, now display.current frame is the frame that I'm in while I'm formatting at this point. I can now see stuff in there. So there's the areas. There's one area, one column. There's the content. At this point, there's just one line. There's a lines object, but if I keep stepping through, you can see that the lines array keeps building up. So I can now start looking at each of the individual lines on the page while APP is formatting. So I can see that this line here, which would be the second one on the page, is a paragraph start, and then this is the text that it contains. And I can get some information about counters, for example. So there's a list of all the counters, and you can see what their properties are at that point. Just crazy how you can drill into really deeply into the amount of information that you've got available there. So I can anticipate display being a really, really useful thing. So one of the things that we want to do in the future, you know that highlight method that we had on lines earlier. What I'd like to be able to do is when we click on a line over here, have an option to highlight the line actually over in APP. So you can see, you get a visual cue to tell you which line you're looking at when you're in there, which would be pretty awesome. Let's get rid of that and move on. So you now got an understanding of the editor. You've got an understanding of what's going on over here in this inspector. You can see the breakpoints. You can see the scope chain and how you got information about the state of JavaScript, and you can sort of start looking at different objects, which is pretty good. So down here, in the last two areas, you've got this console area and the command line. So what you can do down there is I can now create a new tag inside APP, or I can issue a command to APP using the command line thing. Now, it's JavaScript, so if you want to sort of create a new tag, for example, then you would use the JavaScript command, tag, hello. I know type 90 is a JavaScript function. If I hit that, what gets returned to APP from that command is an fstream object. So there I can sort of start looking at the properties of that fstream object that I just created. A whole load of information there. But what I need to do then is I need to refresh my resources list, and there's a hello tag. So one of the things that we're going to do as we sort of build on top of this is have a bunch of tools in the resources tab to be able to create tags and delete tags and rename them and all that kind of thing. But for now, if you want to create tags through this method, then you need to use the command line and get it that way. So if I wanted to then edit that inside there, I can do that kind of thing. Now, if I do something naughty in there, let's do something like content.functions body. I'm calling this this body tag as a function in JavaScript. If I do that, what does it say undefined? What it should say is you can't do it. Should have got an error back. I did earlier. Can't remember why. Maybe I typed it in wrong. Anyway, what you should get in there is an error, and that you can drill into that error in the same way that you can drill into the objects and find out what's going on and why the command that you issued is incorrect. What else can you do? Okay, so let's do this. This is going to be a little bit weird, and I got told off for doing it earlier, but it's quite good fun, so I'll show it to you anyway. So what we're going to do is I'm going to put a breakpoint in about here. And I'm going to refresh and then start. Hello. what's going on. Okay, it is doing what I think it's doing. So it stopped at this point. What I can do while I'm going through the code is edit the code. It's a bit scary. So I can do formatting current style dot color. Right, and then I can step through another couple of times. And look, the paragraph which I just changed is now gone red. The others haven't, because while APP was sort of formatting through these bits, it didn't have this line of code in it. But there it is. After I'd edited it, it was there, and it executed this line of code just in this specific instance. So this is kind of useful if you want to develop stuff and you want to see the result of it and how it differs from what you've done before. Then you can do this kind of thing. So edit in real time. So another thing you can do is edit objects. Now for that, I'm going to need a different document because this one isn't set up to work in the way that I want it to. So which one is it that I want? Blocks. This one here. All right, so we got a version of the demo file, but this time it's got blocks in it. Oh, it's starting to run out of time. We've got blocks in it. So if I put a breakpoint in here and refresh, it's going to pause at this point. So I'm going to step through a couple of times. But what I can do, okay, I've got the S-style object over here. This is assigned to the S variable. I can do something like change the color to blue. So I'm actually editing the object, editing the variable at this point, rather than editing the code. So if I do that and then step through until it finishes, you see that that instance is then blue. If I were going to refresh again, take that off and refresh again, everything will go back to black, to red, sorry. So I'm actually editing that object, so I can make subtle changes to what APP is doing while it's formatting by editing those bits. Again, which is pretty useful bit of something to do. Okay, so that's that one. So this is, like I say, the first iteration of the debugger. Hopefully you'll see that it's a really useful and powerful thing to allow you guys to develop your templates and to find out what's going on, debug it. We're going to be using it internally to help figure out what's going on in support cases, that kind of thing. But hopefully you guys are going to get the most use out of it as you're developing your templates. It's something that we're going to build on in the future and start doing more and more stuff with. Okay, so expect it to change and to become more useful as we add functionality to it. If there's something that you really, really want, stick an idea up on the community site and or send me an email, and we can talk about it. Okay, so that's the debugger. Let's move on back to the PowerPoint. So we've added some extra other sort of debugging kind of functionality. So this API, the debugger uses this debugging API to communicate with APP and to find out what's going on and to sort of set up breakpoints in the JavaScript engine and all that kind of thing. And as I said, if you want to find out more about it, I've got a document which will sort of detail the API. What that means is that because we're open about it and want people to start using it, you could create your own version of the debugger. And one of the things I thought that people could create is like an interface to a specific template which allows them to change, or a customer to change just specific things inside their template rather than having access to all the template code. But they can do that through a web interface, which is kind of easy. The other reason why we did it this way, using a web interface, is because often APP is running on a server somewhere. So it could be running under Publishing Engine, or it could be running on a server using APP server on your network. And what you can do is connect to it from anywhere on your network. So all you've got to do is open the socket, and as long as you know what the IP address is of the machine and the socket number, you can connect to a remote version of APP, and then pause it and run through your debugging tasks there. So kind of related to the display objects, we wanted to create a way of outputting some information about the fields, and we did that by sort of generating an XML instance, and that's this thing called field debugging. So let me open that one, that sample file, and tell you about that. Format tree demo. Here we go. So here I've got a couple of frames with some content in it. There's some text there and a table. And what the field debugging stuff lets you do is generate a big chunk of XML which describes what's going on in a particular stream on a particular page. Okay, so you can turn on and off loads of different options. You can turn on like block and table information. You can source position information, the coordinates like the X, Y, and height and width kind of information. You can get access to the keeps values as you're formatting through. You can get access to frame information and whether things are balancing or hyphenating or whether there's breaks involved. So there's a whole load of extra information you can get at. There is, in the display objects, there's a generate format tree method, and that will allow you to specify the stream that you're interested in, finding the formatting information of, and you can direct the output to either an external file or to a tag inside your document. And then you've got these flags which sort of tell you the different types of information that you want to get. So this sort of gives you an example. It's one of those things where you can do, if you want both source position and page coordinates, then you would put a 3 in there, for example. True tells you whether you want true or false. Here tells you whether you want pretty printing or not. So in this example, this is an example of the format tree information that you get out. As I said, it's XML. 80, that'll do. It's XML, and it sort of verbose, but it gives you a whole load of information what's going on there. So if I go into here, let's comment that line out and use this one here and refresh. See that the XML is updated with a whole load of extra information. So there's the X and Y coordinates, there's the baseline position, that kind of thing. This information is displayed in millimeters rather than decimicrons, in case you're wondering. Okay, so if you want to sort of generate a report about where all the different fields are on your page so you can find out what's going on, then you can use this kind of thing. It's very, very similar to the display objects, and it shares an awful lot of the same code as the display object. So if you want to, sort of, rather than writing a report based on display objects, you just want to dump out a piece of XML, then you can do that using this method here. Another thing that we've added is XPath performance profiling. So one of the main areas that we get performance questions about and support queries about is the state of how long it's taking people to format certain stuff with lots of different XPath expressions. And as you all know, you can write some really terrible, really inefficient XPath expressions if you really want to. So we've got this tool now which allows you to profile your template while it's formatting to generate a report about how long each XPath expression takes and the nodes that it gets actioned on and how long each of them takes and the number of times that they get processed. So if I pop up the tag which did that, so it's part of the logging tools. So here I'm basically opening a log, setting the template debug flags to XPath debug, and what it does is it generates this tag here, XPath profile, generates that tag here, which gives you a whole load of information about it. I've deliberately written really bad XPath expressions, things like, all descendants, for example, or preceding or following, that kind of thing, are pretty awful because they take a long time to sift through all the different nodes. And there's thousands and thousands or tens of thousands of nodes in this piece of XML. It creates 111 pages of this kind of nonsense. and it's really slow. And that was deliberate because I wanted to find out how long things took and give you a good estimate of what's going on there. So the total time taken there is displayed in minutes, seconds, and fractions of a second. You can see the number of times it goes into, executes that XPath expression, and the maximum time it took for one of those to be executed. So if you have the same XPath expression, but it's in one particular case it's doing a really, really bad job of it, you can find that out. It also gives you the name of the node where that XPath expression is being executed, which is useful, so you can track down the exact place where you're executing that XPath expression that's being so naughty. Okay, so that'll be it then. That's what we've got in 11.1. As I said, the main thing in there was the JavaScript debugger. If you've got any questions about that, then I'd be happy to answer them. Chris,
hi Simon. I think we have a question from Massimiliano about can you connect the debugger from a different IP?
Depends on your firewalls and all that kind of stuff. I would recommend only connecting to it on your local network.
Okay. Okay. And we have another question from Ravi about the best way to learn JavaScript in terms of APP. And I think, you know, we have covered that on previous broadcasts, but you know, we can certainly offer more information on that, but just certainly that the core of JavaScript and not all the web-based stuff is really what you need to know.
Yes.
To enter into.
Go out and buy JavaScript: The Good Parts by Douglas Crockford, published by O'Reilly. That's a good book. And the JavaScript Definitive Guide, also by O'Reilly. The author's David Flanagan. Go and get those two things. But the best thing to do is get in there and play with it and find out what's going on. The FOM is pretty extensive, and hopefully the debugger will, with its autocomplete and sort of little pop-ups that give you information about what's going on there, hopefully that will accelerate people's learning in the formatting object model. Chris, I think we sent out a bunch of samples as well about how to do stuff. In APP, in the documents samples, there's a whole load of JavaScript stuff in there as well.
Yep.
FOM samples, which will give you some information about what's going on. And there's also Richard's tool that he wrote to generate the PDF on the FOM, based on the FOM definitions. That's quite a good thing to look through, because that'll give you some information about how to use it.
Certainly, yeah.
Alrighty.
We do also offer, you know, training or specific requirements or you know, analysis on those kind of things. If you're looking at JavaScript and FOM for the first time, it's good to get that insight.
What I would say is that if I can learn it, pretty much anybody can learn it. I'm not a programmer, and I'm not particularly clever, so I'd say that if I can learn it, anyone can. But don't be daunted.
That's great. We have another question about PDFlib in 11.1, I think. XMP, metadata, and tooltips, and various things like that. Is that planned for future maintenance releases, or?
Yes.
Okay. There you go.
Yeah, it's part of what we're doing to sort of make as much use of PDFlib as we can. Right.
Okay. And that will be, we can find that information in your roadmap for.
Yeah, we don't have it. We don't have that stuff targeted to a specific release because, well, we very rarely, if ever, commit to anything publicly.
Yeah.
Because things happen which take away resources, you know, get them distracted on, you know, fixing super urgent SPRs, for example, which take 3 months to resolve. So we don't like to commit to things because anything can happen. But it's definitely on our roadmap. It's definitely something that we want to do.
Okay. A lot of features already have come from PDFlib on, you know, the transparencies, layers, tooltips,
Yep.
and various other things that were never possible before. And
PDF tagging was the big one that saved us about 2 years of development just by using PDFlib to do that.
Yeah, and I think it's very stable now on in the latest version, so it's definitely usable.
Yep.
The common question I get asked about all those functionalities is, will it ever be available in PostScript? And I think that's, just to answer that, is probably a definitive no, isn't it?
Yes, that's right.
So
that's right.
As PDFlib gets increased and you know, it should be more capable of all those different areas you need. So
Yep.
There's another question about namespaces in the debugger. Is it fully compliant with all sorts of namespaces, multiple levels of namespaces, if you know, organize your tags within your templates differently, and it should just read whatever you have inside your templates?
Yes. Let me show you an example. All right, yeah. Document. This thing here, let's pop that open. So this is one that's created from Styler, and that uses an awful lot of namespaces for doing stuff. So you can see Starsheet 0, and inside there I've got a whole load, and I can drill down into specific levels of namespace and then see what's going on inside the code inside there. So yeah, we represent namespaces in the same way that we do in the tag browser in APP. What we're planning to do is make this resource tree a lot more functional. So, you know, provide searching and ways of limiting the number of tags which get returned, and different ways of organizing your information, as well as being able to create, delete, and rename tags in there. We just didn't get a chance to do it for this release. So hopefully in M10, which will be sort of December-y kind of time, we'll have more functionality in there.
That's great. Okay, I think that is all the questions we've got coming up at the moment. So thank you very much, Simon. That was really
no problem.
Good. And I think general consensus was positive on having that available to now. I think that's a brilliant tool. And,
I would say that I used the debugger in Anger in an early stage, and it saved me probably about half a day on just one simple little problem. So I'd encourage everybody to use it as much as possible. It really is an eye-opener to what's going on inside APP, and it'll make your life a whole lot easier.
Yep, I certainly wish we had it in V10. Okay, thank you very much, Simon.
No problem, Chris.
We will send out links for the resources and the files, and eventually the video recording for today's session to everybody that registered and is online at the moment. So thanks very much for attending, and see you all next time. Bye-bye.